I invite you to stand as you are able for tonight's reading that comes from the book of John, chapter 13, verses 1 through 17. Now, before the festival of the Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them till the end. The devil had already put it into the heart of Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray him. And during supper, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was tied around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus answered, "You do not know now what I am doing, but later you will understand." And Peter said to him, "You will never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "One who has bathed does not need to wash except for the feet, but is entirely clean. And you are clean, though not all of you." For he knew who was to betray him. For this reason he said, "Not all of you are clean." After he had washed their feet, had put on his robe, and had returned to the table, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have set you an example, that you should also do as I have done to you. Very truly, I tell you, servants are not greater than their master, nor are messengers greater than the one who sent them. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them." This is the gospel of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Please be seated. Jesus knows it's time. It's time for him to go. Jesus knew that he was going to be arrested in a few hours and crucified the following day. The night before he went to the cross, Jesus was not self-consumed or agonizing about what was going to happen to him. Jesus was focused on relationship, creating an even deeper bond and intimacy by performing a significant act that results in something the disciples would never forget, something they are to model for others. Back in Jesus' day, when you walked around in sandals for miles and miles and miles through dirt and sand and mud and other strange things on the ground, the person washing your feet gets the worst of it. Now just imagine the things that those feet would have come into contact with. And the smell. Well, that's why washing feet was the job of a servant. And not just any servant, but the lowliest of all the servants. So you can imagine how outrageous it was to the disciples when Jesus wrapped a towel around his waist and he knelt down to wash their feet. Jesus, he was choosing to wash the dirtiest part of them, becoming the lowliest of all servants. Jesus took the posture of a servant to display his love, humility, and service. Well, he knew he was going to be betrayed by Judas, disowned by Peter, and deserted by the rest of the disciples. Yet he washed their feet, and he loved them till the end. As Max Lucado so eloquently puts it, the one who all nations will one day kneel now kneels before the disciples. Hours before his own death, Jesus' concern is singular. He wants his disciples to know how much he loves them. More than removing dirt, Jesus is removing doubt. For the disciples, Jesus washing their feet was a behavior that was in direct conflict to what they believed the Messiah to be. Well, they had visions of great affluence and authority and prestige because of their connection with Jesus. In their minds, it was despicable for Jesus to perform the demeaning task of a lowly servant. Matter of fact, earlier that same evening, while they were waiting for Jesus to arrive, the disciples had been arguing over who was the greatest one among them, instead of caring for each other. They were self-focused, comparing and competing. Just imagine it. When Jesus stepped in to wash their feet, the disciples were stunned into silence. For us, washing feet is symbolic of our role in the body of Christ. Now, the Lord washed the feet of the disciples, and we, as God's loved ones, are to wash each other's feet. What does that look like for us today? Well, I have a friend, Suzanne, and she is the best foot washer ever. She was the definition of humility and serving, as she loved and cared for me and my family during my father's hospitalization and his ultimate death. Well, Suzanne was the one who invited us over for a home-cooked meal on the weekends, brought me meals during the week, took my kids' lunches to school when they forgot them, grabbed groceries or made a Target run for me, took my girls to piano, soccer, and karate. She was the one who came over in the middle of the night to be with my girls when I got the call from the hospital. She was washing my feet. She was showing love with humility as she served. She was doing what Jesus was modeling for the disciples. How could I respond to that kind of love? Well, I did nothing to deserve Suzanne's love and humble service. And the disciples, they did nothing to deserve Jesus' washing their feet in love and humble service. And we, you and me, we have done nothing to deserve what Jesus has done for us. How? How can we respond to that kind of love? Jesus knows the sin of his disciples. He knows the sins that we have committed. Still, he washes away our sin, and he loves us. Jesus knows it's time for him to go. But before he goes, he wants the disciples to understand what he has done for them. Jesus washed their feet to demonstrate love, humility, and servanthood. And he wanted them to realize that they were to carry this mission into the world after he was gone. They were to move into the world serving God, serving each other, and serving all to whom they brought the message of salvation. Jesus openly expresses his love for the disciples, and he makes it personal, saying, I am giving you a new commandment. Love each other in the same way that I have loved you. Everyone will know that you are my disciples because of your love for each other. And this new command, it was given because it was time for Jesus to go. And before he left, he wanted them to know that the love that he had for them and that they should show that love to others. His focus was on relationship. His relationship with the disciples and the new commandment that he gave them, he also gave to us. Wash each other's feet. Jesus put the disciples before him. My friend Suzanne, she put me before her. And it's hard to make sense out of that. At the time, Suzanne was humbly serving my family. I didn't even recognize it. I was too distracted dealing with my father's illness. But in time, after my father's death, I saw how it all fit together, and I began to understand. She was showing me the love that she had for me by her humble service. And the disciples, oh my goodness, they were totally distracted by their selfish aspirations, and they were irritated and confused by what Jesus had done. And Jesus sees this, and he tells them that they may not recognize in the moment how it all fits together. But the promise is sure. Later, you will understand. In this statement, Jesus is foreshadowing his death and his resurrection. But the disciples, they just can't realize it at this point. Jesus knows it's time. And he did the most important thing. He focused on relationship. And he created an even deeper bond and intimacy by performing a significant act in humble service, showing his love. something we, something you, and something we need to do for each other. Whose feet will you wash? It's time. Amen.